Hello, church family. For those whom I have not met, I'm Nicole Ofczarzak-Enckhausen. My mom always wanted me to marry a Smith, but as God would have it, I married a German named Robert Enckhausen. We have 3 crazy little children whom you might have seen causing quite a stir at the children's sermon. Ava, who is 12, Abby, who is 4, and Cooper is 2. So Pastor Don asked me a couple of weeks ago to give my testimony. And once again, I had to laugh. The first time he humored me was when he asked me to lead our tag ministry. Honored and flattered as I was, I thought, do you know me? He can't know me, or he wouldn't have asked me to do such things. But because I loved Don, I could not be a Peter and deny him, so I said yes. Growing up, I was always part of the church. My dad's side was Catholic and my mom's side Lutheran. I pretty much belonged to both churches well into my 30s and even became a Baptist at one point. I've been baptized multiple times and confirmed twice. I always knew there was a God and I knew the verses, but something was missing, and that was a relationship with God. I was lacking intimacy with our Creator. I come from a very large and loving family and definitely think I was extremely spoiled. But just like any family, we had our issues and shortcomings. I fault no one for the path I chose to take, nor have I any resentment or ill will towards those in my life. For I know now that everything is of God, and He uses all situations and circumstances for His good. Romans 8:28 tells us, and we know in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. I always loved Him, but I did not always follow Him. When I was about 12, my life began to travel down a path that would cause pain and hurt to so many I loved. Like I stated beforehand, I have no blame for others, but I strongly believe that sin has consequence. Coming from divorced homes, I developed a deep insecurity and a desire to be loved. Instead of turning to God, I turned to temporary satisfactions. Drugs, alcohol, boys, you name it. I began running away from home. I refused to go to school. I stole money from my mom and grandparents. I hung out with an older crowd and began to tell my mom how life would be. It would be on my terms. I set my hours. I came and went as I pleased. I became extremely violent with others. I became physically aggressive with my mother and my sister, and I began getting into fights at school and outside of school. I could go on, but we'll be here all night. My parents saw my brokenness and decided to get me help. It was at the age of 13 I was committed into a short-term treatment facility for 30 days. It was enough to scare me for a short while, but soon after that, I would be committed for well over a year. I was devastated, depressed, deeply saddened, and alone. I was unable to see those that I loved for some time. I spent the first 30 days fighting the system, and when asked by staff and therapists why I was there, my answer was because my mom brought me here. It took me a while to get real with my issues, but once I did, the progress began. After I made my way back to the real world, I stayed on the straight and narrow for some time, but then I headed down the same road as before with even more destructive behaviors. My saving grace, though, was that I learned in treatment that this most likely would happen and how to rely on God to dig out from the pits of hell that had become so familiar. For years, I lived a very selfish life. I was a pro at doing the whole what makes you happy mentality. I was the fun girl and nothing bothered me. Others' feelings were of no concern. I was a strong woman. I never wanted to commit, have children, or marry, not because I didn't believe in marriage, but because I upheld marriage to the highest and didn't want to end up in divorce like my parents. I'd built a massive wall around myself to keep others at bay for fear of hurt or abandonment. Although God has always been present in my life, I was not always present in His. Once I had my firstborn, Ava, I really started seeing and feeling God in a way that I never had. The love I felt for her could only be from God. I never even knew I could love someone so much. I began to crave family and just wanting to be the best mother I could, and as a desired change for myself. I began to seek Him more. Please don't think this was overnight. I saw no great light or heard God's voice. It took years for God's plan to unravel, and I am still a work in Him daily. When Ava was 3, I met my husband, Robert, whom again was God sent. He broke down my walls, and I literally knew the first time I saw him, he was the one I'd love forever. Then my other 2 children came, Cooper and Abby. More blessings from God. My heart overflows. There are so many blessings in my life that I often find myself in tears. Why, I ask God. Why would you be so good to me after all I have done and continue to do against you? Why I have been unfaithful to you, Lord, and I fail you daily. When I became a part of Bible study fellowship, I began to get it. I always knew some scripture growing up, but just verses here and there. I always thought people from the Bible that had God's favor were perfect and holy. I thought that most people in the church were pretty righteous as well, and I couldn't really compete with that. Plus, living that life would be no fun at all. But then I started soaking in the Word, story by story, and I realized that these people were full of sin, faults, flaws, and sometimes just downright wretched. They all failed God at some point, not just once, multiple times. They were no different than I, but He loved them anyway. Each of them was a work in progress. But God used people like this to show us what transformation looks like in Him. He is the Creator, and He is the author of our lives. He was always in my life, but it wasn't until I called upon Him that my path started leading directly to Him. My life now with God is just full of hope. It's full of Him. Yet it is true that I am a sinner. It is true that I fall short of His glory, and it is true that I fail Him every single day. But it's even truer that He loves me, that He forgives me, and that He will never ever leave my side. My life and circumstances are not always easier because I believe in God. I know that He doesn't promise me a happy life, but knowing I've called upon Him and believe that He died for me and my pitiful sins and He rose again is great comfort to truly knowing I will live with Him forever. No matter where we are or where we've been, He loves us. He is our only hope and the only one who can fulfill us. I know that no matter what may occur in my life, He will use it for His glory. The truth we know about God should not be kept for ourselves, but shared with others. What a more perfect time to tell your neighbors and all the world that Jesus Christ has risen.